Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of Vitamin Retailer and Nutrition Industry Executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. The purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Dr. Annie George has over 20 years experience in research. She joined Biotropics Malaysia, Berhad, in 2007 and manages the research and development of herbal ingredients and nutraceuticals. She's managed over 20 clinical trials on herbal products for efficacy and safety in the indication of men's and women's health, glucose management, cognition, weight loss, and immune health. She also manages toxicology, safety, and concept studies. Dr. Annie is currently the co-inventor for 16 patents filed on natural products, the latest being Uricoma longifolia, or Tongkat Ali, for immune health and antiviral properties, and Polygonamines casum for cognition. Now, prior to Biotropics, Annie also worked on natural products as antibiotics in a Japanese company, Nomura Genetic Solutions. Prior to this, she worked on tissue culture of near-extinct plants, such as pitcher plant, monkey plant, and food crops. Dr. Annie has published several publications in peer-reviewed journals with a focus on herbal ingredients as health solutions, often communicates research at conferences and media. Welcome, Dr. Annie.
Hi, it's good to be here, Gene.
It is great to have you. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, could you just explain about what's the relationship between Biotropics Malaysia Berhad and HB Ingredients?
Yeah, HB Ingredients is our exclusive distributor in the Northern American region. So they distribute all our herbal ingredients for us in that region. And we've been working with them almost 20 years already.
Yeah, and you know, I'll tell you something. I've been working with them a long time too. I've, been a large part of my career, I've been formulating products, and I formulated a number of products using ingredients from HB Ingredients, certainly, including what we're going to talk about today, which is LJ100. So let's start there. Could you tell us what is LJ100?
Okay, LJ100 is actually based off a standardized water extract of the root of Tongkat Ali. That's what's known in the Malay language in Malaysia, but it's also known as long jack, and the scientific name is Uricoma longifolia. So this standardized extract, we have put in almost 19 clinical studies on it. We have shown that it's able to do a lot of bring a lot of good benefits to our body, and we have also strengthened these toxicology studies as well. We've done up to 11 studies, which is GLP studies, and that shows that it is safe.
Excellent. Now, let me ask you this. A lot of different herbs or any nutraceutical has different mechanisms of actions, different ways in which they work. So how does LJ100 work?
Okay, so the early studies between Massachusetts Institute of Technology and also the research institutions in Malaysia has uncovered that there is a peptide and also compounds within the water extract of the root that is able to modulate testosterone levels. And we've done further research to show that basically it increases the activity of the enzymes within the biosynthesis pathway of testosterone, such as the 17-hydroxylase and 17-20-lyase enzymes. And therefore, we have more DHEA produced, which is the precursor of testosterone. And at the end of the day, you have, a healthy modulation of testosterone.
So that is something that I certainly knew about. I don't know if everybody out there did, but let me ask you this too. Does LJ100 have a reputation as an adaptogenic herb?
Yes, of course. The thing is, it's definitely an adaptogenic curve because we've also done clinical studies to show that while it increases the testosterone levels, it actually reduces the stress hormone cortisol levels in a very healthy balance. We've seen this in endurance studies, and we've also seen this in studies where we use moderately stressed subjects. So therefore, we know that this is definitely a adaptogenic curve.
That's great. And it's, when people think of adaptogens, they think of some of the more common ones, ashwagandha, ginseng, rhodiola, some of those. But in fact, LJ100 does have some very meaningful adaptogenic properties. I've mentioned I've used it before in formulations, and I have to say I've had a lot of positive feedback from people who have used it, which brings me to the next question. So there's a number of different benefits for LJ100. Could you tell us what are some of the better known benefits of LJ100?
Well, it's able to increase energy, physical energy, mental energy, and it's also able to increase muscle strength and muscle mass. It's able to increase stamina as well, because we've seen this in endurance study, as I mentioned earlier. And it's also able to reduce stress in stress subjects and modulate healthy immunity as well in the person. So we've seen these benefits, and a lot of these benefits are actually attributed to the ability of the herb to modulate healthy testosterone levels in the body.
One of the things you mentioned there was on immune health. Could you tell us a little bit more about the effect of LJ100 on immune health?
Sure. Well, we did a clinical study in Japan, and we used this method, which is a patented method developed by Prof. Hirokawa, in which he measures the different immune cells within the body, and comes up with a score of immunological vigor. So what we've seen in this study is when we used subjects who were moderately stressed and also above 40 years in both men and women, we noticed that it was able to increase the lymphocytes, which are actually the white blood cells, and it includes the B cells and the T cells, the B cells that produce antibodies, and the T cells, which actually raises a response towards an infection. So when we have sufficient lymphocytes, it's able to ward off the infections that we are predisposed to. So we saw that improvement. We saw the improvement in immunological vigor. We also saw improvement in naive T cells. Now, naive T cells, it tends to reduce as we age, simply because we have an immunity which is less robust. But the thing is, when that happens, we do not have sufficient production of T cells to fight off the germs. So what we saw in this study was that it was also able to modulate and increase the naive T cells so that it is able to fight off the germs. So this is really, good news for those who are aging, to be able to use this to sort of support their immunity.
Indeed, and ever since the COVID pandemic, people have become so much more aware of the importance of supporting their immune system in different ways. And one of the things that continues to trend in the dietary supplement industry is products that can address more than one issue at a time. And the idea of being able to have something that can have a positive effect, like when I think of LJ100, the first thing that comes to my mind is testosterone, but I know it does other things. But to be able to have something that at the same time is having a positive impact on the immune system, even anybody who is coming out with a product where they want to use, let's say, a nutraceutical for testosterone, there's no downside to saying, oh, and by the way, research also shows, that it's beneficial for immune health. So that's pretty cool. And also not unusual for adaptogens. Adaptogens often have a positive effect on something like immune health. So that's great. Thank you for that. Now, again, people often think about something that helps testosterone as something good for men. But the fact is, there's research on LJ100 for women. So what I'd like to ask you about is the effects of LJ100 on strength and muscle health in women.
Yes, definitely, because I mean, we often think of testosterone as a hormone for men, but it's also an important hormone for women as well. I mean, women need this for better brain health, for even for physical health, such as strength and muscle health in women. And we actually started our research in women much earlier in our time in biotropics. In fact, in 2013 itself, we started studies on women. And what we have seen is that in two particular studies, where the women were asked to use a hand grip to actually measure strength, hand grip strength, using a dynamometer. And in another study, we also looked at women doing strength training and to see whether they were able to bench press better and also to do leg press. And we found that with the supplementation of LJ100, they were able to bench press, better repetition, much greater weight than those who were on placebo. And in fact, even the hand grip strength improved with supplementation right up to 13%. And these are older women, I mean, mature women, 40 years and above in one study, and in the other study, 50 years and above. So we can see that this can really improve muscle strength in women as well.
That's vitally important. It's important for a number of things, but when I think about women and some of the risk factors in women's health, we think about things like osteoporosis, and one of the things that's most effective in battling that is strength training and helping to build. Strength training itself helps to build bone density, and if you can promote strength and muscle health, I think a side effect of that is likely to be something good. And I think I'm going to ask you just a little bit later about bone health in women, but not quite yet. But I just wanted to make that connection there for our listeners. Excellent. Now, while we're on the topic of women, I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the other things that LJ100 does for women, particularly women who are menopausal or perimenopausal. Can you address that a little bit?
Sure. I think in order to talk about the effect of and the benefits of LJ100 in menopausal women, we need to know what are some of the symptoms that affect menopausal and also perimenopausal women. And it affects women in varying degrees. It's not the same for every woman, but we see symptoms such as hot flash, night sweats, even anxiety, depression, and also predisposition in the loss of bone, and also softening of muscles as well. And so these are some of the symptoms that we see, and it can actually affect the quality of life in women, especially if she's a career woman. It may affect how she feels, her sense of confidence at work, and also in her communication with family as well. So we have done two clinical studies on this population of women. The first one is on the Caucasian women. We did the study in collaboration with KJK Science in Canada. And what we did was we gave them a score of a menopausal quality of life. It's a questionnaire, which are 29 questions covering 4 different domains. One is the vasomotor, such as hot flash, night sweats. The other one is on psychosocial health, which is things like, how do you feel today? Do you feel anxiety? Is there loss of memory, difficulty sleeping? And the other one is on physical domain, which is joint aches, decrease in strength, and also in sexual domain. So when they were supplemented with 100 milligrams of LJ100, they saw that the menopausal quality of life improved by 33%. So that is actually, that's significant, yes. And not only that, they had the group that had hot flush, they had a reduction by 15% over the placebo. There was also less occurrence of joint pains, and they just felt more energetic at the end of the supplementation. And one of the side effects that we saw, the good side effects, was that there was an improvement in cardiovascular health because we saw the LDLs reduce, we saw the triglycerides reduced in the group that took LJ100. And this was accompanied with the 8% increase in the bioavailable testosterone. So we know that, a little bit of modulation of these hormones brought a lot of benefits to these women. So that was just one of the studies, in the Caucasian women.
That and one of the things I love about that is the different effects you were finding. It wasn't just, oh, it's relieving hot flashes and night sweats, which alone would be a great thing. But the fact that it was having cardiovascular benefits, it was having joint health benefits, it was having these other areas of benefit is very, very meaningful. That's what I'm talking about, a nutraceutical that can do multiple things. And and this one demonstrated it just within one study. That's pretty awesome. Now, what about, so let's talk a little bit about testosterone in women just a little bit more. One of the things that I know when I've talked to women over the years, and they're like, oh, is this any supplement that is designed to help and to modulate testosterone levels, whether it's total testosterone, bioavailable testosterone, they've often asked, well, is that safe for me to use? Like they're concerned that if they use that, they're going to start growing, facial hair or something. And I always tell them, no, it's not like taking an injection of testosterone. It's not like that for men either. You don't have to worry about that. But could you talk just a little bit more about sort of some of the effects of testosterone in women? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but maybe it'd be good to repeat that now.
Okay, sure. The thing about testosterone in women, we have 10 times less testosterone than men have. So whatever, we don't have to be afraid or concerned that, we're going to start bulking up and looking like a man, or we're going to start, having facial hair. And especially as the woman matures, the levels of hormones really take a dip compared to men who actually have their testosterone levels sort of just depletes over the years. Whereas for women, when they come closer to menopause, it just takes a huge dive in. And that really has a huge impact on women's health. We see occurrence of brain fog. There's also less energy. There's also, sort of onset of anxiety because they feel that they no longer have control over their bodies and also the way they behave. And also there's a dip in libido as well. So testosterone is actually important to bring this up back to a good level, for mental clarity, for better motivation, for the feeling of gung-ho, I can do this, and also an improvement in libido. And of course, it has the impact on our bone health and muscle health, which at the end of the day, you would need that, because otherwise you're going to be quite predisposed to losing balance, falling, that kind of issues.
Right, understood. That's great. Thank you for that. So besides testosterone, what are some of the other hormones that LJ100 can impact?
Okay, we've seen in an animal study that is also able to improve the neurotransmitter dopamine in a mild manner. And we know that dopamine is a feel-good hormone. It's also able to give you that motivation. And it's actually quite important in being able to give a person the ability to think and plan. So that was also improved in some studies that we've seen. The other thing is, once the testosterone is produced in the body, it can also aromatize to estradiol. So we've seen a small aromatization into estradiol as well. And these hormones, we know, are important for the women's health.
Indeed. So just for my own interest on that, so did that aromatization take place in women, more in women who had a slightly higher percentage of body fat, or did you see that pretty much the same across the board?
The thing is, in the clinical studies that we had, the women had a BMI of below 35. So we've seen that the improvement is not significant between placebo and the active, because women have different levels of hormones. And so it only impacts the women who have really, really low levels of these.
Got it. That makes sense. I've just seen, and read some research on men who were using testosterone and weren't using any kind of an anti-aromatase and were particularly obese men, ending up with little higher levels of estradiol because they, the aromatase in the adipose tissue was converting it a little bit more. So that's why I was just curious about that. But thank you for that. That clarified it.
Yeah,
Now
yeah. I'd just
you
like to
also
add that.
mentioned, yeah, please.
Sorry, Gene. I'd also like to
No.
add, we've also seen studies in which, because the thing is, LJ100 is not a steroid. It's not like a testosterone that you're injecting
Yeah.
into the body, right? It's an adaptogenic herb. So what we've seen that it's actually involved in the hypothalamus pituitary axis. So whenever there's sufficient amount of testosterone, there's a negative feedback up to the hypothalamus pituitary so that it does not overproduce testosterone. So we've seen that in
Nice.
several studies. So we don't have to worry about that overdose.
And that's great too. And again, I keep coming back to the old adaptogenic effect, hypothalamus, pituitary axis, and the effect of adaptogens on that, creating that balancing effect that makes a great deal of sense. Now, you mentioned earlier that I also wanted to, you mentioned an effect on DHEA, you mentioned effect on cortisol. Could you just kind of elaborate just slightly on that?
Oh, sure. So the thing is, we've seen in endurance studies, we've seen in studies where we use stress subjects, where there is also, whenever there is the thing is because cortisol is produced during chronic stress, right? And also during sort of exercise, which is extreme kind of sports. So the cortisol is also produced quite a bit there. And what we've seen in studies, in fact, even studies done by Dr. Sean Talbot, who's based in the US, he did the study on cyclists who are into endurance cycling or 24-hour cycling. And what he observed was that with the supplementation was able to keep the balance where the cortisol levels were kept low and the testosterone levels were kept high. They had better fatigue recovery. And this is what we've seen with the supplementation, is able to keep the stress hormone down. And so therefore you are more in an anabolic state rather than a catabolic state. Yeah.
That's very positive. And then it had a positive effect on DHEA too, which is great. I'm sure a lot of our listeners already know, but I sometimes like to refer to DHEA as a starter hormone, and meaning that your body can use it to make testosterone, estradiol. It can do other things with it. And so, and as we age, like other hormones, we have a decrease in that. And so something that can actually help improve that along with the other steroid hormones, that's just absolutely a big plus. And so I just wanted to emphasize that particular benefit of LJ100. Now, as an adaptogen, one of the classic adaptogenic benefit one thinks of is affecting stress, perhaps mood, and in fact, LJ100 is no slouch in that department. Can you tell us a little bit about its effect on stress and mood?
Sure. We did a study in the US where Dr. Sean Talbot again did a study on moderately stressed subjects where they were both men and women in the study, given 200 milligrams of LJ100, and they were given this profile of mood scores. So in this profile of mood scores, you measure things like tension, anger, confusion, total mood disturbance, and vitality. And what we found that with the supplementation, it was able to reduce tension, it was able to reduce anger and confusion up to 15%. And we know that by reducing this, the person is, of course, less stressed and calmer. And when he did a blood test on this, we found that the testosterone levels were higher and the cortisol levels dipped. So we can see the collaboration between the two effects.
That's fantastic. I like it because a lot of time we just think of adaptogens as, again, helping with stress in some nebulous way, but this is very specific. You see the increase in testosterone, the decrease in cortisol, so we can see the mechanism by which that's happening, and it really, I think, lends a lot of credibility to the effect of LJ100 it's adaptogenic effects, but real specifically on stress and mood. So that's awesome. Now, I told you earlier I wanted to touch again a little later on, and this is that time, on the bone health benefits for women of LJ100. Could you just elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So some of the early studies, because the thing is, we knew that if you improve testosterone levels, then chances are you would also improve bone health because we have androgen receptors in our bone as well. So there was a study that we did on animals, and we noticed that the animals which were androgen deficient, when they were given the water extract of Tongkat Ali or LJ100, what happens was that the osteoblast, which is the bone forming cells, it increases, and the osteoclast, which is the bone mineralization cells, that one decreases. So we know that during the turnover, there's more production of osteoblast, which is bone forming, through this study. And we also noticed that the osteoprotogerin gene expression increased. And when this increases, it actually reduces the osteoclastogenic effect, which means, it reduces the bone reducing cells from forming in the bone.
Right.
And that was just the animal studies. But in the clinical studies, that is interesting. We noticed that the biomarker for bone mineralization, which is the NTX, in short, the cross-linked N-telopeptides of type 1 collagen, that decreased, a 10-fold decrease compared to the placebo. So we know that it's just not in the animal that this benefit is happening. It's also in women that take the supplementation that improves a lot.
Well, and I think that, again, that's particularly important for people to understand, because whenever we think of LJ100 or any nutraceutical that has benefit for testosterone, we just sort of naturally think men. But what you've told us today is that there's some real significant health benefits for women, strength and muscle benefits, menopausal benefits, the benefits from testosterone, and the benefits from bone health. I mean, there's just so many areas here where it can be beneficial. So that kind of debunks the myth that supplements that are good for testosterone are just good for men. They're good for women, at least if they have the research to support it, and LJ100 certainly does have that research.
Sure.
I would also add, just from some of the reading that I've done, that I'm impressed in general on the effects of LJ100. You find research, of course, in men as well. You found increases in total T and DHEA in married men. You found increases in T in athletes and non-athletes as well. You found, again, this reduction in cortisol and increase in total T in mountain bikers. You found an increase in total T and DHA levels and sexual health scores in men as well. And speaking of men, improvements in sperm morphology, sperm mobility, and male partners of subfertile couples. So, I mean, wow, the amount of research done on LJ100 is kind of staggering. It's quite impressive. It must be pretty exciting for you to be involved in some of this research. I know when I've been involved in research, I'm most excited, but you've really been able to go deep here and be involved in so many different studies. Is there anything else about LJ100 or anything that we discussed today that you wanted to add to the discussion that maybe we hadn't covered yet?
I think, Gene, you did quite a bit of reading and you sort of covered the entire benefits of LJ100.
Fair enough.
Yes. But I just wanted to add, I saw an interview between Todd Brunstad of Natural Product Insider, in where he interviewed Ola Lessard of 9 News Marketing, where he asked, what do women want? And her reply to that was energy, better sex, and sleep. So I hope that with all the evidence that we have presented for LJ100, women can finally also get what they want.
Nice. That's a very good way to wrap up the discussion. So, Dr. Annie, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to have you again sometime on the Vitamin Professor to talk about LJ100 or maybe one of the other interesting areas of research that you're involved with. And for our listeners, I wanted to remind remind you that if you like what you heard, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again, Dr. Annie, and thank you to our listeners.